Greetings, Warlords. Welcome to yet another game of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest, the card game, played on Iridio.net. In this game, I am playing against Echo again, on the Traxxas sector, and I am playing as Yvraine, a Dark Eldar Warlord. Yvraine's main gimmick is making her other units be considered a Warlord for the rest of the round, as well as giving them a nice +1/+1 permanently to their stats. This is decently strong. However, because Yvraine has to target a unit at an adjacent planet, it tends to be fairly obvious where Yvraine is actually going to commit to. Deck building wise, she cannot target elites with her ability, so she's generally encouraged to spam a lot of low cost units like Void Pirates, Sith Mercenaries, Rogue Traders, all that kind of stuff. On the other side of the table we have Talyesin Fharenal. Now, Taliesin's gimmick is a bit like my gimmick, where we want to spam as many low-cost units as possible, but instead of it being because we cannot target elites with our ability, it is because for each warrior or psyker unit at Taliesin's planet, they get +1 health. And if there's both a warrior and a psyker present, they also get +1 attack. So your Warlock Destructor would move from a 3 attack 4 health unit to a 4 attack 5 health. Your Incubus Warrior goes from a 3 attack 1 health to 4 attack 2 health, etc. So generally the ability is stronger when used on lower powered units, because a +1 attack to a 4 attack elite of some kind is not particularly noticeable, where it is noticeable on your Bieltan Guardians. So that's basically a doubling the attack. Matchup wise, Taliesin is fairly good against Yvraine. This is because most of Yvraine's cards, such as their signature squad, tend to deal with elite units very well, but can't really deal with a lot of squishy dudes. Therefore, Yvraine is expected to struggle in this matchup, although it shouldn't be too one-sided. Yvraine just needs to win a couple of good command struggles and battles in order to keep the game on a level playing field. Since I haven't mentioned it already, the Poker Errata and bans are in effect for this one. So, now we can talk about our opening hand. In my hand, we have 2 copies of Yvraine's Entourage, a Triumvirate of Yniad, a Cabal of the Ebon Law, a Flayed Skull Slavers, a Shadow Field, and the Host of the Emissary. So, right off the bat, against elites, this would be a fantastic hand. But we're not against elites, we're against Fharenal. So really, I should mulligan this hand. In fact, if I was playing this game again, I think I would definitely mulligan this hand. We don't have any cheap command units, we just have decent combat units. As well as Cabal of the Ebon Law, which is a good target for Yvraine. However, this game, I wanted to see if Host of the Emissary could actually do something. Host of the Emissary is, simply put, one of the worst cards in the game. So I was just like, well, let's try and make Host of the Emissary work, see if it does anything. Alright, now we have the first deploy turn of the game. I'm not too thrilled about my options here, but I want to play Host of the Emissary just to see if it does anything. So I really have 4 resources left to spend on the rest of my units. So I play Yvraine's Entourage to Barlas. Now while Yvraine's Entourage is not that great against Taliesin, it's still got some decent things it can do. Of particular note is that against Warlock Destructors, it will switch their 2 attack and the Warlock Destructor's 3 attack to essentially gain 1 attack and nerf the Warlock Destructor by 1. So that could help me win the first battle. Especially if I buff it up with Yvraine, since then I won't even have to shield the oncoming damage, and I'll be hitting for 4 attack, which is enough to kill Warlock. Unfortunately, my opponent has played a Phantasmatic Mask, which is a base attack of 0, so Yvraine's entourage is not going to do anything to it. That, and it has an ability to get around Yvraine's entourage even if it did have an attack. Seeing this, I decide not to play Host of the Emissary, as clearly the battle at the first planet is going to be much harder to win than I thought. So instead I'll play my Flayed Skull Slavers to Fharenal, and hopefully be able to get the 2 additional resources from it, for a total of 4 resources, which will then let me play the Host of the Emissary much more easily. He plays a Biel-Tan Guardians, jumping my 1 command there with his 2 command unit. Then I play out a Cabal of the Ebon Law, and he plays out a Slith Mercenary, jumping another one of my command units. And at this point I am forced to pass. He plays a Warlock Destructor to Taurus, which is a little surprising, since he's going to have to keep paying the tax on that unit over and over again. However, he probably just wants to prevent me from triggering Taurus at all costs, since if he wins the Battle of Barlas, I'm definitely going to have a lower unit count than he does. And now he also passes, so we have to decide where to commit our warlords. So the obvious choice for me is Fharenal, because if I commit to Fharenal, then I'm going to get my 4 resources from the Flayed Skull Slavers, and I'm going to make the Cabal of Ebon Law be considered a warlord, so I'll be able to win a battle at Atrox as well, killing his Sliver Mercenary. But there's also a choice of Planum, in which case I can either increase the value of Yvraine's entourage enough to be able to kill the enemy unit in 1 hit and not die to the counterattack, or I can increase the Flayed Skull Slaver's value and or make it considered a warlord, which will allow me to kill the Biel-Tan Guardians, setting me up to win the command struggle there the next round. So quite a few good choices here. In particular, if he sends his warlord to Fharenal, then if I send my warlord to Fharenal, I'm still losing the command there, and I'll basically just be picking up the Slith Mercenary on Atrox Prime. That's the only real difference there. Whereas if he sends his Barlas and I send mine to Planum, then he's going to win the first battle planet. However, he's not going to be threatening any of the other battle abilities or anything like that. So generally, here I would commit to Planum, although I think there is definitely a reasonable argument to be made for committing to Fharenal instead. He ends up committing to Barlas, so he is going to win the battle at the first planet this round. Not too much to talk about here, he's just going through the motions of killing my unit and then triggering the battle ability. Now I can trigger Planum, so here I could move the Flayed Skull Slavers. However, I decide to move the Cabal of Ebon Law so it is not facing the Slith Mercenary anymore. That way I'm essentially getting its 1 command icon back. and then I win a battle at Ferrin. So now I can route a unit, which is almost certainly going to be the Warlock Destructor, as it does not. If it's in his HQ, he still has to keep spending upkeep on it. However, he ends up playing Foretell, so I do not get to use Ferrin's ability. Now we enter the next round. So I have drawn a cheap command unit, another Yvraine's Entourage, and another Triumvirate of Aeneid, which is good because my previous one was discarded by Balas's battle ability. So it's good to have a second one. For my opponent's deploy turn, he plays another Phantasmatic Mask to the first planet. So once again, this is another one of those 0 attack units, which I can't really do anything against with my Yvraine's Entourage. I play out a command unit, and he immediately plays the Bielitan Guardians, trumping the command unit. So anything I play at this point is probably also just going to get trumped as a command unit, since he still has 5 resources left with which to play cards, so he could easily have another Incubus Warrior in his hand. So I decide to play the Host of the Emissary now, just to see if it can do some damage to him, although I don't have too much hope. And now he plays another Slith Mercenary, trumping my Flayed Skullslavers. So he's currently winning or tied the command to every single one of the planets in the game. So not a good look for me, and I'm forced to pass. And now we are committing our warlords again. So at this point, if I commit my warlord to Ferrin, I'm not going to be able to use my warlord's battle ability. So not too many good choices. At this point, I could try to win a battle at Taras, which would be good. I would then get 3 cards or 3 resources from Taras. I would win a battle at Ossus 4 by giving my same hand Kinston +1 attack, +1 health. So that seems like the best idea here. Unfortunately, my opponent also commits to Taras, probably since he suspects that I was going to commit to Taras to try and trigger the battle ability. So I'm not going to be able to win this battle, as he has both a Psyker and a Warrior present, so he's got +1 attack, +1 health on both of his units, both of his non-Warlord units. And my opponent wins 4 command struggles while I win none, so it's not looking good for me. So now we have the combat phase. My opponent deep strikes his Scorpion Striker at the first planet, so that's interesting. I didn't expect that. Scorpion Strikers aren't that good of a unit. When you deep strike them, you get to exhaust a target non-elite enemy army unit, which isn't bad, but it's also not that good. But against Yvraine in particular, that's actually quite good because you're going to generally make one of your dudes very large, and it's going to be a non-elite unit. So therefore, if I have, say, a 4 attack, 5 health unit, then Scorpion Striker can exhaust it without too much issue. Here, I get to use my Host of the Emissary for the first time, so he's going to have to sacrifice one of his units. So this might be good. It probably won't be enough to turn this game around, but at least it's a start. He moves his Phantasmatic Mask to Taras. So right now, since that has +1 attack from Talyesin and 4 health, it's going to swing for 5, probably against my Warlord. So that's a huge amount of damage. It's a warrior, so if he has Shuriken catapults, he could ambush them into play in order to kill my warlord, well, bloody my warlord right now. Now we have a battle at Ossus 4. So obviously I'm going to win this one since I have a 3 attack, 3 health unit against his 1 attack, 1 health unit. Not much contest there. And I'll take a resource from him. Okay, so I've now drawn a Shrieking Exarch, but unfortunately it's the nerfed version, so it's only going to be able to use its ability once per phase, which if I'm lucky will be 1 time this game. And everything else I've drawn doesn't really help me deal with the huge force that he's putting out. On the plus side though, I do get to use my Triumvirate of Yniad to deploy 2 units from my discard pile, reducing the cost of each one by 1. So that's pretty good for me, it will help me get back into this game. He plays a Warhost helmet. Now this is a attachment that can be attached to any same hand unit. It gives him +2 health, and well, a long reaction, but the short answer is that when it is attacked, you can exhaust your Warlord and reattachment to prevent all the damage. So that's going to massively help Taliesin with survivability. It also costs 0 resources, which is incredible for what it's doing. So I play out another Yvraine's Entourage, and actually I decide to talk with my opponent and say that I want to actually move that unit to Taurus instead. This is because I have a plan for it. I'm going to put Shadow Field on it, and then, since each of his units have a cost of 2 or less, they won't actually be able to damage the Yvraine's Entourage. So that could help me clear out Taurus, and as Taurus is going to be his victory condition, that could be really helpful for me. But it relies on him not playing any other units with a cost of 3 or greater. I do mess up the commands while I'm trying to move the unit from Atrox Prime to Taurus and accidentally move the Flayed Skull Slavers. Whoops, so I better just move that back quickly. But I do get there in the end. My opponent plays another Warlock Destructor to the first planet. So since he now has a warrior and a psyker there, if Taliesin went there, he would have both the buffs from Taliesin's ability, so that's not good. I continue with my original plan to put the Shadow Field on Yvraine's Entourage so that it can't be damaged by the enemy. Unfortunately, he plays a Taliesin's Warlocks to Taurus. This is a very strong unit. It costs 3, and it can attack for 3 with 2 health. And as a combat action, you can discard a warrior from your hand in order to ready it. If Taliesin goes to Taurus, then it's going to be attacking for 4, so that's all but guaranteed to kill Yvraine's Entourage, although I could swap the attack of Yvraine's Entourage with the Taliesin's Warlocks, which could maybe make it survive a few rounds of combat. So, command phase begins. I think it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to win the battle at Fharenal without my Warlord. Or even with the Warlord, it probably will just get bloodied. So it depends on whether I want to go to Atrox in order to buff one of my units, or if I want to go to Taurus to try and trigger a battle there and kill the Taliesin's Warlocks. In my case, I decide that I would like to go to Fharenal in order to get the +2 resources from my Flayed Skull Slavers. I think you could also go to Atrox and trigger activate Yvraine's Entourage on Terrace. But I think his ward's going to go to Terrace, so I don't think it's worth it, as that is still his victory condition. He doesn't need to fight over Fharenal, so not too much reason for him to go to Fharenal. So I should be able to head to Fharenal and get the 4 resources without too much trouble. Unfortunately, he does commit his ward to Fharenal, preventing me from getting the +4 resources from Fharenal. And at this point, it is basically just completely over for me, as I'm going to need to try to win a battle at Taris in order to prevent him from winning the game, but it's going to be far too easy for him to just send all his units there and Archon's terror the Yvraine's entourage or something like that. Still, we play it out just to see if we can somehow claw our way back into this. You will never know if you don't try. I attack the Slith Mercenary with my Flayed Skull Slavers with a value of 4. Since they're his only warrior is this planet, so if they die, then his Ward Destructor will only attack my world for 2 because it has been reduced by Yvraine's Entourage. In which case I'll be able to shield it and then retreat with my Warlord. Whereas if I didn't do that, he's definitely just going to kill my units and then win the battle without too much difficulty. Unfortunately, he does have a 2 shield card, although it was very likely, and it is a gift of Isha, so it's pretty good to be able to get that out of his hand. Although this does mean that I'm going to lose my Warlord. So now I can try to kill his units, although it's going to be very difficult since I just do not have the attack to do so, and he's going to pretty easily clean up my remaining units. I do end up shielding my Flayed Skull Slaver enough in order for it to live, though. So if next round I commit to a red planet, I'll be able to get the +2 resources from it, which could help me afford the units that I need to actually win the game. Or at least not win the game, but survive a battle at Taris. During retreat, I decide to actually stay with one of Yvraine's entourages, since it's basically not going to do anything later on if it arrives exhausted, and I may as well try to kill off one of his units with it. I do manage to kill off the Slith Mercenary, although unfortunately that unit was just going to die anyway, so it didn't really do anything. I could have attacked his Warlord, but again, because of the Warhost helmet, he would have been able to just prevent all the damage, and then he would have killed my unit and the attack with his Slith Mercenary, so it doesn't really change anything. Meanwhile, I have the choice to use Host of the Emissary, but he has no army units that can be sacrificed to that planet, so it doesn't do anything. Completely useless. And we move on to the next round. So all that I really have in my hand are 3 units, one of them being a Shrieking Exarch, which is probably the one I have to play. as well as Archon's Terror and Flickering Hollowsuit. Flickering Hollowsuit's pretty good here. I can put it on the Shrieking Exarch, although unfortunately that means that it'll probably just get routed by an Archon's Terror. Not too much I can do about that. But we may as well try to get some sort of value out of it, so I end up playing the Shrieking Exarch to Atrox Prime. Since if he does use an Archon's Terror here, it's one that he won't have for the Battle at Towers later. He has a bit of a think here, as it's not clear what he wants to play, but he ends up playing a Talyesin Spiders to Carnath. So when the Psyker at another planet is declared as an attacker, he'll be able to move that unit to the same planet, which will then give him the +1 attack bonus if he didn't have a warrior there already. Although that probably won't be the case, he probably will have a warrior already. In the meantime, I play out my Flickering Hollowsuit onto my Shrieking Exarch. And he plays out a Luring Troop. Now this unit can move a unit from one planet to another, or to an adjacent planet, and then at the end of the next phase it has to move back to its original planet. So with this he can move my Shrieking Exarch to Terrace, and what he's probably going to do here is play a Luring Troop on Atrox to move the Shrieking Exarch to Terrace, then he'll play a Luring Troop on Terrace in order to move a Shrieking Exarch to another planet, maybe Ossus 4. And then he'll choose the order in which the movements back to their original planets occur, so he'll probably move it to Atrox and then to Taurus in order to win the battle at Atrox Prime, just to get some damage on my units. Since it doesn't have to win Taurus, he can just win the battle at Ossus 4. Although he might also just be playing it just as a combat unit, since it does have decent stats. It's cost 2, 3 attack, 2 health, and those will be buffed by Yvraine, and not Yvraine, by Talyesin. Meanwhile, I am forced to pass, as I have no units I can play. And he also passes. So I don't have too many good options here. Either I go to Atrox Prime, I have to retreat to Warlords in order to not get bloodied, or killed rather. Or I go to Taurus and then have to retreat to Warlord in order to not get bloodied or killed. Or I go to Ossus 4, in which case the 2 units that I'm bringing with me will not be able to participate in the key conflict. So I decide to go to Taurus here. I might be able to, if I can just kill the Taliesin's Warlocks, then I'll be able to retreat with all my other units, and the Shadow Field on the Yvraine's Entourage will be able to single-handedly defeat the remaining units. This could work. It's not likely though, as it's very difficult to kill those Warlocks. We have a battle at the first planet, so this is going to be pretty one-sided, as my Shrieking Exarch can try to kill something, but all he needs is a 2 shield card in order to avoid the unit being killed. So now we just watch hopelessly as the rest of my Shrieking Exarch's remaining health is slowly depleted by his onset of attacks. But on the plus side, I do get to use my Host of the Emissary to force him to sacrifice one of his units. So we have a battle at Talos. Yvraine's entourage swaps the value of the Warlock Destructors and Yvraine's entourage herself in order to try to increase the damage we can deal to the Taliesin's Warlocks. So we attack for 3. So he needs a 2 shield card in order to survive the hit, which he probably does have. And he does. So now I play an Archon's Terror in order to try to rout his Taliesin's Warlock so that it can't kill my unit. However, he's going to play a Nullify in response to my Archon's Terror, preventing me from using it. And now he ambushes a Shuriken Catapult as well as playing a Path of the Leader to give his unit, a Phantasmatic Mask, a total attack value of 7. And that will be enough in order to guarantee a kill on my Warlord. Right, post-game wrap-up. So this was generally a very painful game for me, as I was unable to compete with his units command-wise for basically the whole game. So there's a few bad calls on where I thought his Warlord was going to go. If I'd been able to prioritize going to Fharenal in order to trigger my Flayed Skull Slavers for +4 resources more times, would have been much better for me. But I didn't, alas. So over the course of the game, the host of the emissary killed a Scorpion Striker as well as a Sliff Mercenary that was going to die anyway. So it basically only killed a Scorpion Striker. It is very expensive for what it does, and I definitely should have just mulliganed it out of my opening hand and hope I didn't draw it. But oh well, it's fun to try to see if these cards can work. And again, if it was against an elite opponent, then yes, it would definitely work, but it's not. It's against a Taliesin, so it's going to kill a Sliff Merc or something like that. Something not particularly valuable. Regardless, GG's my opponent. It was a good game, and I'll see you in the next one.